Seven Steps to the Sun by Fred Hoyle and Geoffrey Hoyle. I'm a sucker for any kind of time travel story, so I eagerly began reading this book. The main character, Mike Jerome, is a writer. His best friend, Pete Jones, is a jazz musician. Both are in their 20s and working to establish themselves in the flourishing arts community of London, circa 1969. Mike wants to sell a science fiction series to the television network. He has recently gone through a nasty breakup with his life partner, Sue. She's moved out and taken all her stuff and a lot of his stuff as well. He needs to generate some cash flow. From a masseuse named Colleen Winston, Mike gets an introduction to a scientist named Professor Smith. He hopes to get some theoretical physics from the man to use as the skeleton for his SF project. Smith informs Mike that time travel is theoretically possible, but not in the way it is usually handled in fiction. Some sort of time machine is impossible. However, a system could be devised in which the components which make up an individual could be reduced to electronic data and transmitted in a beam of light. Outside Pete's residence, Mike is struck by a taxi and loses consciousness. When he awakens in a hospital, he has no serious injuries, but he is exactly 10 years in the future. June 7th, 1979. He leaves the hospital and finds his friend Pete. Pete and everyone else thought Mike was dead. The 7 years required by law had passed, and he had been pronounced legally dead, and his estate settled. It seems Sue may have ended up with all the accumulated royalties from his previously published work. As he is trying to get a handle on this bizarre circumstance, Mike witnesses a strange electrical phenomenon, and Pete seems to be injured. Once more, he loses consciousness, and once more he wakes up 10 years in the future, on June 7th, 1989. He learns Pete is supposedly dead, and he may be held responsible for his friend's death. Mike is taken into custody by a military organization. Something's not right. He determines it's in his best interest to escape and do his own investigation. He escapes a bit too easily. It's almost as if the military men allowed him to get away. Mike learns there is no solid evidence that Pete actually died. He suspects that his friend may also be caught up in these time shifts. There is no evidence that Professor Smith ever existed. His only avenue seems to be locating Pete, wherever he is, and perhaps they can sort things out together. Mike's next jump takes him to Australia, which is in the midst of a major food war with other countries. Overpopulation has caused a worldwide food shortage. All countries are desperately producing as much food as possible, but they are all forced to use military services to protect their farms and their stockpiles. Another jump takes him to northern Italy. Battles are raging all across the countryside, and he learns the entire world is on the verge of collapse. This inexperienced rider is forced to become a warrior and a survivalist. His next time jump takes him back to June 7th, 1969. He is in the hospital recovering from broken bones he suffered when struck by the taxi. Remember the taxi? The accident that set this whole sequence of events in motion? Mike recovers. All that time travel stuff seems so real. Still, he has to face the fact that it was just a long, vivid dream. He pitches a time travel story idea to a network executive, and soon they are in pre-production. After a hard day's work, Mike catches a cab. He notices the driver is navigating the taxi in a very unsafe manner. The novel ends with the driver turning so that Mike can see his face. The driver is Professor Smith. Okay, so this novel was written by the father and son team of Fred and Geoffrey Hoyle. If I had to guess, I'd say Geoffrey did most of the actual writing. The first two-thirds of the book lacked the sort of polish I found in other books by Fred Hoyle. Fred may have been trying to give his son a leg up, which I find commendable. Good job, Dad. Geoffrey studied economics at Cambridge and served as a science advisor on a British TV series called Time Slip. This was aimed at a juvenile audience and featured a boy and girl traveling through time and learning to rely on one another as they face adventures. Geoffrey was writing SF in Britain at the same time as John Brunner was producing a lot of work. I have not found any evidence that they were friends, but I suppose it's pretty likely. When I researched the Time Slip series, I learned that one of the early episodes had the same title as Brunner's book, The Wrong End of Time, which I reviewed last week. Just a coincidence? Perhaps. Like I've said elsewhere, I collect coincidences. I like this cover art by Jerome Podwell. I remember seeing a lot of books with covers by Podwell back in the early 70s. They usually had a lot of mist and castles and tense women in period clothing. In short, his art was frequently used for Gothic romance novels. I have to admit I enjoyed reading 7 Steps to the Sun. Not really sure why that title was chosen. The time leaps do represent steps of a sort, but a link with the sun was never introduced. I did consider an aspect of Fred Hoyle's novel, October the 1st is Too Late, in which it was found that data streams were flowing out of the sun and causing time anomalies on Earth. Perhaps they considered weaving that idea into this story and just never followed through with it, or perhaps they were going to do it in a subsequent novel? I don't know. Just idle speculation on my part. I'd be willing to bet this was Geoffrey's bid at producing a story that could be made into a TV series. His exposure to the business as a science advisor on Time Slip probably made him desire to become more involved in TV production. It's got an episodic quality with the sudden time jumps. We've seen this sort of thing in The Time Tunnel and later in Quantum Leap. I'll be checking out more collaborations by the Hoyles. It was an entertaining read, and for all I know, it may have been intended to be part of an ongoing series. It certainly has a setup that leads the reader to expect more. 7 Steps to the Sun by Fred and Geoffrey Hoyle. Not bad. If you are enjoying these science fiction book reviews by Brett McCormick, please like and subscribe. Also, comments are always welcome.